Okay, so we're going to go over the Capstone overview slides that I think most, if not all of you have seen, but it's been a while, so it might not be a bad idea to go through them again. What we're going to do, we already had our discussion and roundtable of topics and looked at the calendar and did some Q&A, but now we are at the Capstone overview section. So, you know, this is a real world project. It is a sustainability improvement project so that the organization, when you finish with it, will be a more sustainable and a better manager of what they're doing. It involves several meetings with your stakeholders, so make sure that you pick somebody who you know how to get a hold of and is willing to meet with you periodically. You will use some kind of a sustainability audit tool. Now, I mentioned to, I think one of you at least is going to be doing an improvement project with a sustainable organization. If you do that, then you are going to give them, do an analysis of their operations to make them better managers and more effective in being a sustainable organization. So you may not use a sustainability audit tool, but you will use some kind of a measurement tool and some kind of a gap analysis. Then you're going to measure your baseline, analyze it, research best practices, recommend improvements, and run a pilot study and measure the improvements from the pilot study. Sounds like a course that you took. This is not your typical course with teaching every week, although I will give you I will do a weekly overview that kind of reminds you of what we're going to be covering, just so that you know. If you want to get some of the materials from the course, from the 4781 or 4783 that I mentioned that you all should get out, you should download everything. But some of you have had computer outages or upgrades or whatever and have lost it all. So if you need to be put into the courses, then I will put you into them, and you just for a week go in, download the stuff, and then that should be fine. It is also not an independent study project per se, because there is a weekly schedule. Okay. We do have these weekly seminars that like we're doing tonight. We have a weekly debriefing session for feedback. Whoops, you do weekly written sections. Obviously, I need to fix my animation. And then you will do rewrites, but I will not regrade your rewrites. It just will be graded at the end. And there are two products, a paper and a presentation. The presentation is like a TED Talk. The paper is a sustainability improvement paper project. Okay, what does this say? Project management. We are going to be kind of like a consultant firm. You are the manager for your project. I am your boss. So you need to keep me up to date that at the staff meeting, if there's some reason that you don't have a written section because the stakeholder hasn't given you something, still write a little report in the Dropbox, because this is not only your evaluation, we also use it for program evaluation, and I need to know whether there's whether the issues are because of student issues or whether they are because of stakeholder issues. Okay, now if you miss multiple deadlines, you can lose up to 40 points, which is 1 letter grade. Okay, you submit a new chapter from the template each week. I've tried it both ways of asking you to submit the entire template or asking you just to submit the chapter. The problem with submitting the entire template is that there's only a 10 megabyte Dropbox size. So about halfway through your paper, you're going to have to submit it separately in separate chapters anyway. So you might as well just go ahead and submit a new chapter each week, and then you can drop it into the template. Okay, teams. I only need one submission weekly. Both or all, that should be all, contribute. But I want you all to use different colors. So if there are two of you in the team, one of you write in black and one of you in blue, or one of you in green and one of you in purple. Try to make it a color that I can read, or else I'm going to have to go back and, as we're talking, and change the color. But the reason is because you do get graded differentially, and believe me, you will appreciate that. So I need to know who is writing what parts. Oops, WebEx. Oh, this is an old one. Good heavens. No wonder it's not making sense, because I know I have a newer one. But at any rate, we'll just go ahead and use this because it's not WebEx, it's Zoom. We have Zoom feedback.
So our weekly submissions from the template, is it just going to be like Word?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that one portfolio class.
No, you're not doing the portfolio. You are writing a chapter in Word, and the final presentation can be in Word or it can be in Prezi.
Okay.
And if you, unless you have some other kind of presentation software, and then we can talk about it. Okay, the project has a 16-week deadline. Now, you may not get everything done in 16 weeks. Most people don't. But you can, but you have to have enough of it done so that you can do a small pilot, measure the pilot, and you can see how that goes in the calendar in the next week or so, or the next couple of slides. What?
Could you give like an example of what you mean by pilot?
Yes, I will
Cool.
get to that in a second.
Cool.
Okay. Rescoping may be required. Sometimes you find that what you have decided to do is too big. And with the discussion with your stakeholder, you can make it smaller. You may have decided to do an energy audit, and you realize after you get into it that it is huge and you really want to scope it to be just a lighting audit. That's okay, because sometimes it's a lot bigger than what you think. The client is the primary stakeholder, but not the only stakeholder, because St. Pete College is also a stakeholder. So this paper is kind of a balance between a business proposal and an academic paper. So because it's an academic paper, we need to have APA, that you follow all the APA requirements. Of course, you always want to cite it, but it's got to be double spaced. It's got to have the proper headings. By the way, there is now a new APA version 7. There are not very many differences. And I won't ding people if you're still using version 6, but if you're interested, they do have a couple of improvements actually for the first time. So you might want to go and see what the differences are. Okay, this is good. This is correct. So this week, you are just going to be doing the team or individual project idea paragraph. And as I say, if you're in a team, one person can submit for the team. If both of you submit this week, I don't care. But when you get into the chapters, you're going to be meeting together with me as a team. So just go ahead and submit one chapter. Now you will notice that you don't start with chapter 1. You're going to start with chapter 2. That's because you really have to have your stakeholder meeting first off, so that you can get their buy-in with whatever it is, that they know what you're doing, and you can get their buy-in. So we do chapter 2 first, have ever since the beginning of the program. Then the next week, we're going to do chapter 1. So remember, you're going to do chapter 2 in week 2, and we're going to go over it in week 3. And then you're going to go back and write chapter 1, which is, you talk about the business, you talk about sustainability, the sustainability issues, and you talk a little bit about compliance. And I'll go over some of the other things too as we go through. Then you have 2 weeks to do the audit. Now, some people take longer for very good reasons. I had a student who was doing hers in an aquarium store, and she was doing a waste audit on the fish, and not enough of the fish died in 2 weeks, and so she did her audit over 6 weeks. In the meantime, she went on and continued, but she had to take longer to do her audit. Then you're going to research best practices, come up with hopefully at least 3 recommendations for improvement. There's a chapter on change management, and then you're going to write an implementation plan. Pick a small part of your recommendations and test it out and measure the results and scale it up so that you can tell them how much of an impact, if they do the whole thing, how much of an impact it'll have. And then you're going to do continuous improvement and compliance, keeping it going, and then conclusions and the executive summary, which actually comes first, but you don't write it until the very end because it summarizes your whole paper. You don't know that until the end. Then we will have a week of practice presentations. Right now it is the week before Thanksgiving. And then there's presentation week. We usually just present on Friday. This is a fairly large class, so we may present, have a few people who have to present on Thursday of let me see, the first week in December, I think. And then your final projects is due Monday of week 16. This is the grading. There are 10 sections. Most of them are worth 10 points. A couple are worth 15 points. A couple are worth 5. It ends up being 100 points. The final presentation is 40 points. The final paper is 60 points. Most people get almost all of the points here unless you didn't make the changes that we discussed. And so, you know, if you have an overall 70 and then you get the 100, then you're going to have an 85. So you'll do just fine. Project management, as I said, can take off a letter grade. Okay, let's talk about some of the tips for success. These are things that when people don't do them, you lose like a third of the points for that chapter because you didn't do it. The first thing is that when you do your stakeholder in week 2, you have to have a stakeholder model. And it is a model there. You have to have a stakeholder model, stakeholder analysis, and then a stakeholder meeting. Those are the 3 parts to that chapter. And next Sunday, I will go over that in some depth. You also need to include, you focus on the stakeholders that are affected by the project, but it can't just be the one person that you're working with. You have to look at the internal and the external stakeholders that are affected by your project. Okay, in the intro, some people some people leave out the sustainability theories or the compliance info, or they have 10 pages of company info or almost no company info. So there's a lot of things to that. In the audit, be sure you include know that you need to collect data, and then you also have to analyze the data. And sometimes you have to analyze the process. Every one of these is a little bit different. Best practices, it says very clearly, and I go over very clearly, that you have to have an example of your best practice, and you have to have a case study that shows that your best practice works. For some reason, I have students who leave out all the case studies. Don't do that. You'll get a 5 out of 10. Okay, recommendations. You need to do a cost-benefit analysis and some kind of a payback analysis, and then your decisions solution analysis. And resistance to change and change management. Okay, implementation, you must have a Gantt chart, and you must have the resources required. Measuring results. Now, as far as your pilot is concerned, we know that you're not going to be able to go and have your company spend $40,000 on a new HVAC system. So one of your solutions should be something that you can do a very small part of that. It can be as simple as if you're doing a lighting or an energy audit, you can change out one light bulb and measure the difference, multiply it by the number of bulbs and by the number of hours and by the number of days in the year to figure out how much savings there would be if they changed out everything. The same thing if you're doing a waste audit. If they don't do recycling and that's one of your recommendations, you can try recycling in one small area, see how it goes, and then if it doesn't go well, you know you have to do something more or different or whatever. So those are some of the things that are potential pilots. And you do need to have metrics that actually measure how that pilot works. Okay, and then you have the continuous improvement and standardization, and the compliance. Compliance is in 2 places. It's in the introduction, and it's in the next to last chapter. And it is there because one of the program goals that you are being evaluated on is legal aspects of sustainability. And the biggest aspect of that applies to these kinds of projects is compliance. And so you have to see what the compliance issues are that they need to address or that they are addressing. And then afterwards, after you've done your improvement, does it help with their compliance? Or does it bring up new issues of compliance like safety? So
what would that mean in regards to like a waste audit? I'm not trying to ask for like all the answers, but
yeah.
like when it's compliance, like throw the garbage in the garbage can.
Well, no, we see this is what you have to research. What are the compliance issues? Like, for instance, you cannot just dispose of all light bulbs in the garbage. You can't, you are not supposed to put CFL bulbs into the garbage because they have mercury in them. Same thing with fluorescent tubes. So that, and most of if your place is large enough to have a maintenance or facility crew, they know that, and you can ask them and then you can research it. But you know, there are compliance issues with hazardous waste, batteries, that's another one. There are compliance issues with, I think somebody has said they were going to work on either with a real estate company or an insurance company. There's certain compliance requirements with making sure that you keep records. And in the past, those records have always been paper. Are they still? Can you go digital? You know, what is it that's required? And again, with waste audits, there's if you currently have recycling, then there's some things that are compliance in terms of you know, what you can recycle and what you can't. And is that something that, what are you going to do with the rest of the stuff that is recyclable? And the compliance actually has 2 parts. There's voluntary compliance, there's regulatory compliance, and there's voluntary compliance. And regulatory compliance is following the rules that can be federal, state, city, local, county, whatever. Voluntary compliance is things like LEED or GRI, or if they want to do some other kind of ISO. If they choose to do those voluntary compliance, voluntary standards, then there's certain things that they have to comply with.
Such as recycling, that if we're not recycling now, and like the voluntary compliance, like what we would have to do to
what is what are the rules, and that's what you have to look up, is what are the rules. Okay, so skills for success. And if you're fuzzy on some of these skills or rusty on some of these skills or whatever, believe me, your skills will be sharpened through this process. Writing, grammar, spelling, sentence and paragraph structure, and making sure that you edit before you turn it in. I will go through for the first 2 or 3 weeks. I will go through your grammar and spelling and sentence structure and those kinds of things in great detail, but I do not want to spend 16 weeks fixing grammar. And so if that, and believe me, I'm not blaming anybody. It could be that it's been many years since you've had to really worry about it. It could be that you had a really terrible middle school teacher who didn't teach you how to do it correctly, and nobody has caught it all this time. I can speak from experience because I was in my 50s when I did my dissertation, and I learned that I didn't know how to do commas correctly. So it can happen to anybody, very well-educated people who just have glitches, gaps in their grammar, and this is the place where you're hopefully going to fix them. And if after 2 or 3 weeks we're still having serious problems, I will tell you to go to the Writing Center before you submit it. And that is really important, because we can then spend more time on actually working with sustainability, which is what we really want to do. But it is my obligation to make sure that when you turn in your paper, that it is at least a college level writing C-level paper, because we're not going to put you out into the world saying that you have bachelor's level skills if you have serious issues with this. All of you are smart. You wouldn't be here if you weren't really, really smart. That doesn't mean that you're perfect, and we have gaps in our knowledge and gaps in our learning. And because we know how to learn, we can fix those gaps, and that's what we're going to do now. By the way, I have written 2 books in the last year, and my husband is going through one of them, and he's correcting them, and he's doing a really good job. So it's something that we need to do, that we all need to do. Okay. Another thing that you will learn a lot about, if you're not already an expert at it, you will learn a lot about formatting. By the way, the table of contents is, there is a table of contents in the template that you may use. You just have to copy and paste correctly and make sure that your headings are properly formatted, or else you get a table of contents that is pages and pages long instead of 1 page. So, but the other thing that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is making sure that you have a professional look to your whole paper. And that is with the formatting of tables and images and charts and graphs, that it's going to look, they're going to look great. And we'll get to charts and graphs in the next one. Tables. When you read APA on tables, I can tell you that that is the one place where you do not have to follow APA, because their format for tables is terrible. It's impossible to read because they make you double space, and it's just, well, I haven't looked at it in number 7, but the first set of students that I had back 11 years ago, I had someone who was just brilliant at doing beautiful tables. And I did not have the heart to tell her to go back and make ugly tables. And so ever since then, I suggest that you all make very professional, business professional looking tables. And that is the one exception to APA. Okay, skills for success. Excel. You are going to be collecting data and creating charts out of the data. So you're going to have to do some data setup, do the calculations, create the charts. They're going to be beautiful charts. If this is not one of your strengths, you will get better at it, significantly better at it. Mapping. Remember our eco maps? Well, you will probably, or many of you will do eco maps. Not everybody, but many of you will do eco maps. Other people will do process maps like flow charts. And I've had people do this kind of a flow chart, and I've had people do a value stream map, if you remember those. So whichever one, part of your evaluation is selecting the right tools for displaying the information that you have collected, or displaying the data and turning it into information. And so again, what we're looking for is very professional looking maps and flowcharts. And then graphics, using smart art, using photographs, proper attribution for images, look it up. And Purdue OWL, by the way, is still the best for giving you APA information there. And this is especially true, of course, for your final presentation. And it will be like a TED Talk kind of presentation, the kind of presentation that you would be giving to a conference, a sustainability conference or a trade conference. So for teams, tips for success. It is really helpful when you are equal in your conscientiousness. If you have one teammate who likes to have things done by Tuesday or Wednesday, and another one that is still trying to get it in Monday at noon, then you all are going to be stressed out. So be as conscientious as you possibly can with that. You should meet weekly. I say preferably face-to-face in this COVID time. Virtual, it works just fine. But you really need to talk weekly. I had a team that was really worked well. And they met at the beginning of the week to talk about the way that they the way that they were going to go about writing their chapter, and then they would meet over the weekend to put it all together and talk about any editing that was needed, and to kind of help each other out. Now, one thing I have to tell you, if you're a team, you are not to fix your teammates' writing, because this is not your evaluation, it's their evaluation. And so you can talk about how it all fits together. You can certainly fix it after I've had my face-to-face with you, or have had my virtual meeting with you, but that's you are not fixing your teammates' work. So just keep that in mind. Each team member should be responsible for distinct sections of the strategic planning chapters. Your own audit, so if, say for instance, you have 2 people on your team, then one of you should do energy and the other one waste, or water, and or you can do one of you can do a paper waste and the other can do kitchen waste or break room waste, things like that. Once you do your separate audits, then a lot of the other areas are also separate, because you'll do your own best practices research. You will do your own areas for potential solutions. At the very end, your paper should be edited to sound like it's one voice. All team members should present and make the division of how you're going to present something that's logical. Okay, working with stakeholders. These are the required contacts, your initial stakeholder meeting, the audit, because you're going to have to go there and either count light bulbs or measure water or talk to people or get bills or multiples of those things. Because say if you're doing an energy audit or water audit, you'll want the bills and the facility walkthrough. So, whoops, sorry. When you do your solution selection, you want to get their buy-in and make sure that they are on board. They will tell you which solutions will work for them. And you only have to write the implementation plan for those that they're willing to do. So you might suggest a solar array and they may say, ain't gonna happen. Well, then you don't have to do an implementation plan for the solar array. So that can be very useful. You probably will have to go back in to measure your pilot. However, not necessarily. You know, I've had some people who went to Lowe's and measured the light bulbs there. The final presentation is not a report, but persuasion supported with data. And your final paper, you do not have to have an APA format. You can actually change it if you want, it's optional, to make it more readable. I have had some students who have done capstones in a different city or a different country even. I had one that went to Ireland to do her capstone. She was just there for a week. She paid it for her own expense, but she did an awesome job. Okay, when you're working with stakeholders, because this is the real world, you may run into change management issues. First of all, you may have trouble getting data or getting them to sit down with you after the initial time, because sustainability is not their priority. Right now, most of them are just trying to survive. You need to use your best soft skills. You also need to realize that they are the experts and they are not getting up every day and saying, how can I go in and do a terrible job? How can I go in and ruin the environment? They think they're doing a good job. And if you go in and tell them that they're doing a terrible job, they will not appreciate it. So again, you have to use your soft skills and you have to listen to them because they also have some good ideas. Now, there are going to be times when you're going to be asking for information and you're not going to get it. You don't just wait for them, you do contact them again, but at a certain point it becomes bugging. And we have very little control over this, but let me know if you're having some serious issues and we will try to work through them. Okay. Potential projects, I'm not going to go over this because you all can look at it later. Most of you all have decided what you're going to do. If anybody doesn't have a project, you can do a project for the Sustainability Lab, for the Sustainability Program. And that is it. So I'm going to go ahead right now and stop the recording. And then see if let me ask if there are any questions first. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions, Dr. G.
Sure, by all means.
One question is, if we're working as a team and we're doing the first paragraph, how do we split that up? Do we need to do 2 paragraphs? Do we just do half of it, each one talking about the piece we're going to cover?
Well, it depends on what it is that you're that you're doing. For the chapter, starting with the audit, each of you will write half the chapter, and then you'll have an introductory paragraph and then a concluding paragraph that leads to the next chapter.
Yeah, no, I mean just specifically just for the first week's announcement
For the first
of what
week,
we're doing.
Yeah, well, and that will become more obvious when we talk about it next week. Usually what happens, say for instance, with this next week, which is the stakeholder analysis, one of you will do the stakeholder model and one of you will do the stakeholder analysis. And then, you know, one of you can do the meeting, and there are two of you, then you can always split up the stakeholder model into internal and external so that each of you does half of the chapter essentially.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, and the same thing with the first chapter, which is the introduction. One of you can write the company background. Another one can write the sustainability issues. Another one writes the sustainability theories, and another one writes the compliance.
Exactly. Okay, that was my question. Okay, thank you. Gotcha.
Now, there are other ways you could do it. If you wanted to, if you're doing two very different things, you might have different, you might do a slightly different take on your sustainability issues. One of you might write something on the energy issues, and one of you might write on the water issues, for example. And then the same thing with the theory, you might, you know, split that up too.
And would that be in separate colors, like you were mentioning
Yes.
earlier?
Whenever that you're writing, it has to be, as a team, it has to be in separate colors, even
Okay.
if it's the introduction or the conclusion. Now, every once in a while, I have a team who insists that they get together during the week, and they sit there and they write the introduction and they write the conclusion together. You know, then that's fine. You can make that part black. So,
Okay.
but that's a really minuscule portion. Any other questions? Hey, Sonia, how are you doing?
I'm good. I've been here for a little while, just kind of lurking and watching.
Okay, all righty. So any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious if for the presentations, are we doing that in person or online? Just because of COVID, I wasn't sure.
I think that, well, in the spring, we did them via Zoom.
Okay.
I suspect that unless there's some really big change, I think what we're telling everybody is that we are doing this via Zoom also for this semester. All of our college business upper division classes are via Zoom, period. There's no face-to-face.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that everybody's doing their presentations also via Zoom.
Gotcha. And about how long are each presentation?
20
How long
minutes.
do they last?
20 minutes plus 10 minutes Q&A. And we
Okay.
go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool.
And we also want you to be there for like the entire morning or the entire afternoon so that you can be there as an audience for the rest of your colleagues.
Right. Awesome.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to